Hello, everybody. Welcome to our episode and Merry Christmas Eve. So, welcome to the episode, and here we are. We're going to be talking about, the coming year. So, and how to live science, how to set yourself up for an extraordinary year, and really what science has to say about living it. So that's how we're going to start today. And so welcome, Betty. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Excellent.
It is not an easy subject, but anyway, we'll go ahead with it.
Right. So when we look at the coming year and we look at the year we've had, I'm wondering if you look at that in your year in review and you think about, well, what is it that you want to cause in the coming year? How might somebody think about that? Like, how might you think about that?
Well, the thing that I realized when I was working on this particular subject was that we can live what goes on in our world as a victim, or we can live being aware that what's going on is really for our good and looking for the value in whatever it is. So I look at my world right now and I hear a lot of commotion, confusion, upset, tragedy, all of it about the pandemic. And I think to myself, what would science tell me that's going on for my world? And so what it is like an enormous challenge, a really big challenge to see that what is threatening my world and threatening what I call me is a belief that there is something more powerful in my world that can destroy life. And science says
Right.
that's not something we can accept. So I began to look at all of the things down through the years that talked about source, talked about who we are. And I gave some Bible quotes for Kim to put up for us to consider, because one of the simple ones that we hear a lot is the one from Proverbs. In all thy ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. They're talking about the God idea. Well, if I'm going to acknowledge the God idea and have that direct my path, then I'm not going to be living myself as the Betty victim of circumstances beyond my control. I'm going to say, I don't know why it looks this way, but I do know that there's one intelligence functioning in the universe, a really powerful, generative presence. And there is value here, or it wouldn't be going on. So that's one of the approaches I have. And that would hold true for anything that comes up in your life in the coming year. If you can see that what is directing everything is a divinity, Shakespeare called it, shaping our ends, directing our paths, in other words, then it takes the personal victim stuff away. Because if there's a divinity shaping our ends, then we can't resent it. We can't refuse to look at it. We can't have it be bad and wrong. We have to say, oh my goodness, this divinity, this God idea, whatever, that's all powerful, is in charge. And this is occurring because it has value. It's occurring because it's a wake-up call. And it's saying, who are you being right now? Are you being a victim? Or are you willing to see that you live, as an expression of the God idea? And that's the source of this whole thing. So there must be value. So I look for the value. And one of the things that's had me consider a lot this year in my work with individuals that call, as well as with myself, what is life? What is it that's going on all around me? The activity, the movement, the vitality, the spirit. It's got a lot of ways that I can describe it when I describe the look of it, but the presence that has it occur is really the source, the generative source of all existence. So it kind of takes me out of the role of being a victim, helpless and hopeless and all the rest of it. Unless I would prefer to live myself as the two-legged Betty that I see in the mirror. And then that's going to be the victim. But if I don't live myself that way, the Betty in the mirror doesn't suffer because there's nothing feeding it, so to speak.
Right. So when you say live yourself that way, I just want to
Yeah.
back you up a little bit and just say, let's talk about that. Live yourself that way. Because a lot of people could be listening and saying, well,
What are you talking about?
yeah, what are you talking about? Here I am. I'm living. I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
So dive into that a little bit. Unpack that for me a little.
Well, when just take some small, simple thing in your life, you really are in a position at every moment to say, oh, I hate that. I don't like that at all. I will not put up with that. And then you put yourself through the exercise of what it costs you to hate, to be unhappy, to be unpleasant, to be at odds with your world, and so on. Or you can say, I don't know why it happened that way. There must be value here somewhere. So you look for something more valuable. It's informing you of something. And from that stance, you don't have to live yourself as a victim. You live yourself as an explorer, as a discoverer. Oh, what's going on here? This is my world I'm living. It's my life I'm living. It doesn't have to be upset. It doesn't have to be a victim. But if I really think that the only thing there is to me is the thing I see in the mirror, then I automatically fall into the victim category because the thing that you see in the mirror doesn't have the capacity to alter anything for you. I don't know whether that helps or not. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at the distinction between who I know myself to be and what I look like in the mirror. And if I live myself as if I am all there is to me is this.
Yeah.
And I'm moving around, in life, and then there's all those others out there, then I have a limited experience of myself, as opposed to if I'm living the divinity of myself.
Just as you were speaking, we've all had experiences where something occurs. And there's that moment before there's any reaction, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And when the reaction could be anything, look at what occurs when somebody smiles and says, how about that?
Yeah.
You have a whole different take on it than if they said, I'm not going to put up with this. So you talked about attitude.
Yeah.
It's conscious awareness. How am I going to live myself? How am I going to behave in this situation?
Right. And your point of view or what you bring to that equation, what you allow to dominate, has a lot to do with your experience. And I think that goes back to that very first statement was when we pay attention to our devotion of thought, our motivations become really, really clear. And so if we're going to be thinking, if we're going to have an attitude about anything, well, what kind of attitude do you want to design for yourself? What do you want your world to reflect? And then really take that to heart. And I think that can shift a lot of things.
Yeah, and fundamentally, metaphysical science says all is infinite mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mental from start to finish.
Yeah.
And living yourself aware is a generative thing, capacity that you have as being.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in charge of that.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge difference in the way your daily activity unfolds. You know, I'm either willing to take a look, willing to explore, willing to discover the value, or else I'm upset, I'm being Betty, and I'm not going to put up with it.
Right.
And there's a world of difference in those two approaches.
Right. Both in the world you walk through and in your own perception.
That's right.
So if you're going to be deliberate about, what is it that you want 2021 to be about, I think you could look at it and say, just and look and see, well, what is that? What are you committed to? What would you love to see unfold? And how would you like to have those in your life and your world treated? How would you like them to be, like that? So I think there's something in there. Say a little more, Mom.
Yeah, and I know that this sounds like an intellectual discussion, but I would like to see you take it on like a challenge for yourself, because if in fact you discover the mental nature of who you are and what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
you will make a huge difference in the way you live it by addressing it as an idea whose time has come.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an enemy. It's being in a way that impacts who you are.
Right.
And so if you take that on, you're in charge. And it's either a contribution, or if you don't take it on and you try to reject it or dismiss it or avoid it or ignore it, it'll dominate you
Right.
and give you a hard time.
Right. And I think that brings us, I think one of the quotes here, again from the Bible, for this came I into the world to bear witness to truth, capital T.
Yeah, and notice that it doesn't say that I came into the world to figure it all out.
It also doesn't say I came into the world to pass judgment about everything I see.
That's right. That the fact that I came into the world, as it were, and like here I am,
Yeah.
but who am I being as a witness to truth? It's not something I choose to do. Just being there is the witness. The truth is present.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And the willingness to just be is a great freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes I don't know why it looks the way it looks, but I know that if I'm there, it must be a divine experience.
Sure.
On we go.
Right. Now, for those of you who are listening, if you guys have comments or anything like that, you can type your comments in. You can like or love the conversation, I think, over in Facebook or in YouTube. You can also give I think, a thumbs up on the conversation or like it. So if you do that, if you have any questions, if you have any statements, comments, anything like that, feel free to type them in. They'll be a little bit delayed, but we will respond to them. So go ahead. I encourage your engagement. So go ahead, Mom. What?
I was just going to say the key for most of students of science is acknowledgement. And this is going to sound a little bit strange, but the capacity to acknowledge is divine. You know, it's not like Betty can figure it all out and therefore acknowledge. It's like being is present, and the acknowledgement is the action of that being. It's not a Betty decision.
Mm-hmm.
It may look that way, but it can't be performed that way.
Right. Right. Now, Margaret Laird said, mind speaking, conscious thought, although not though, but conscious thought, function, body, being is the science, the reality of all that is seen, heard, and felt.
Sorry about the typo.
Yeah, I'm going to fix it, but go ahead and talk about that.
I can't see it.
I know, I just took it down to fix it. Hang on. There
Okay.
you go. Look it, there it is.
Okay. So conscious thought for every individual is mind action. And mind is not a personal possession. And we're not talking about anything going on in the head or the brain or any of that stuff. We're talking about the being, the divine, whole, perfect being that's present all the time. And you see it and identify it for yourself as Betty or Kim or Brad or Bruce or Craig. Should I say that again?
Yeah.
What's really present, you see, looking like human beings, is being identified in a way that you can understand, identified in a way that's common parlance for them. I can look around and say, oh yeah, there's Kim over there. It's hard to look around and say, well, there's a divine being over there somewhere. But what I really want you to consider is that when I look in the mirror and see this Betty, all I see is somebody that probably has limitations in what she can do and how she can do it and how far she can go and how, all that stuff. But what's actually true is that there is being present. Life is present actively. Vitality is present. Intelligence is present. And all of that stuff is not a product of Betty. It's something that's present, having Betty show up, because it's the only way I can see myself at the moment, if I can put it that way. So we really want to capitalize, if I can use that word, on the reality that's present when the humanity of us shows up. And that's all the time. Here I am all the time. But what I have to keep remembering for myself is that there is being present, no limitation, no restriction. It's all available. Intelligence, humor, joy, freedom, you name it. It's all present, functioning perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not relying on the thing I see in the mirror.
Right. There's a really good quote that I'm just going to jump to from Science and Health by Mary Baker Eddy. The harmony and immortality of man will never be reached without the understanding that mind is not in matter. Let us abide by the rule of perpetual harmony, God's law.
Yep.
So what you've been saying is that which sits in a chair can't think. That there's mind present that constitutes that which sits in a chair. But it's not in it.
The thing sitting in the chair is your best point of view at the moment. And
Right.
that changes all the time.
Right. But I want to talk about, so that's the one thing I wanted to footnote that, or say that, earmark that from what you just said from the last quote. But the other thing I want to look at is abide by the rule of perpetual harmony. Let's talk about perpetual harmony in that rule. The rule of perpetual harmony.
Yeah. Well, the rule of perpetual harmony is letting go of the belief I've got that Betty is the one that's effective.
Mm-hmm.
Betty is just my language for identifying myself. But perpetual being, whole, perfect, complete, the rule of harmony, is what's present. And if I allow that to self-express, if I acknowledge it, then that's what's running the show for me.
Right.
and Betty doesn't get into so many problems.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was interesting when I was working with Mrs. Laird. She pointed out to me that the solution is what demands the problem. The solution, wanting to be seen and observed and recognized or acknowledged, is what has the problem show up, because in resolving it, you do see the fact. So it's kind of interesting to play with that idea that the solution's there before the problem comes up.
Sure. There's another quote that I want to bring up too from Science and Health that says, let unselfishness, goodness, mercy, justice, health, holiness, love, the kingdom of heaven reign within us, and sin, disease, and death will diminish until they finally disappear.
Yep.
So that's a good one, given what we're coming out of this year we're coming out of. Right? So say a little bit more about that. I think if, you know, in being who you are, being the world you walk through, there wouldn't be selfishness necessarily. That wouldn't be your first thought.
Well,
would it?
It's there's another little twist in there that you want to consider. We think that selfishness and injustice and disease and death and whatever, all the negative things we can think of about living, we think that all that is going on outside of our own being.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hear on the television, I hear on the television that somebody has the disease or the problem. And I think, too bad. Oh dear. You know, and there's this temptation to think, I'm glad it's not here. But I've got news for you. I am the world I walk through. And if I ignore that view that says it exists somewhere, then I've included it in my world. And what I want to see is that the kingdom of heaven, God being, is what's going on universally. The being is divine and has each one show up in language that he can understand. But his vitality, his intelligence, his resourcefulness, his well-being, all of that is fully present all the time. And when I stop being Betty and trying to have that run the show, then my freedom shows up in the being that's present, having me call myself Betty.
Sure.
Bunch of words, but I'm trying to find the words that'll say it so we can understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's all part of it, right? Like that's what there is to struggle with. It's like what there is to kind of play with is languaging of these ideas in a way that they communicate where people can go, oh my God, I get it. I can see that. I can see it in my life. So I think that's what part of this is all about, is playing with that.
Right.
Now, let's see. Let's look at this one. From your book, Mind is the Athlete, when you refer to yourself, this is a question for everybody out there. When you refer to yourself, are you speaking of the self of you as being or as a body or conscious thought label? So say a little bit more about that, Mom. Just that question.
Yeah, who am I being?
Right.
And when I say that, it isn't like I have a choice. It's like, where am I standing right now? You know, am I concerned about Betty and whether she looks good and how is her hair and what's she wearing, and oh dear, and so on. So that Betty stuff gets in the way of just being myself. And when I'm being myself, I'm not critical of my world. I'm not evaluating it. I'm not judging it. I'm not trying to manipulate it, maneuver it, organize it, fix it, heal it, any of that. When I'm being myself, I'm being consciously aware that divine being is all that's present, and it's being me, including the world I walk through right now. And so my experience of living myself and my world becomes a smooth operation. It becomes a clear avenue for self-discovering.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
And then,
the value of getting really acquainted with your being as versus your humanity, which is your
right.
point of view of that being.
Yeah. And when we talk about problems, I want to jump back to what Mrs. Laird said in Christian Science Re-Explored. Face it, the problem, realistically as the opportunity to demonstrate a health or wholeness beyond health and sickness, beyond the problem. And by such practice does the spirit grow.
Yeah.
So that's part of the practice. So one of the things that I've been looking at is it's not that life will be without problem. Problems, however, have solutions, and there wouldn't be a problem without a solution. So part of it is just being a solution finder, a solution revealer, or however you want to put that. But it's not about not having problems.
Yeah, it's about, Margaret Laird said, problems are a girl's best friend, like diamonds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then by such practice does the spirit grow. So living science, living this in your life is a constant practice.
24/7.
That's right. And the more you do that, by such practice does the spirit grow.
Yep. And you discover, interestingly enough, from a human point of view, that you're of more value in the world you're living in. You're more valuable to your friends, your family, your job,
Yeah.
because you're free a lot of the human stuff that limits you. You're open to ideas more.
Right. And as you said in your book, until you understand who you are and who you're not, you can't discover yourself.
That's right.
So this is all a laboratory for self-discovery. So as you look at, what am I creating in 2021? And then you set forth on that path, you have that as what you see, then problems are going to come up and you're going to look at that, but walk on consciously aware of what you're creating rather than falling into a reactive victim role.
It comes to me right now to say this: don't live yourself as a policeman on your human living. Just leave the human living alone. You'll eat dinner, you'll go to the movies, you'll watch TV, you'll go to work and come home and do the laundry and fix dinner and all those things. Just go ahead and do all that stuff. But, within yourself, become willing to consider that there is something more than you see when you look in the mirror, or than is sitting at the desk, or than is fixing dinner. That's the activity that you observe right now, called your humanity. But there is like a genius there. There's a brilliant presence, a being infinitely intelligent, loving, vital, energetic, whole, right there, right where you are this minute. And you can begin to look at that and allow that to run your show.
Right.
And, Betty can check out when that happens because things are going so well.
Right.
But
I would say it's like
when Betty's in tears.
Right.
That doesn't change the reality that's present. It just means that Betty has lost sight of who she is.
Yep.
So it's like a wake-up call. Oh,
Sure.
wake up, Betty.
Yep. And what you said in Mind is the Athlete in your book, the self that lives divinely is the source of your power and presence.
Exactly.
So those are some things for you to think on as you're looking at what you want to create in 2021 and really practice and live the science consciously aware in your life. And so all of this is brought and sponsored by the Institute of Metaphysical Science at scientificmetaphysics.org. Go check out our programs, and you can, and Betty's book is there. Christian Science Re-Explored is there. We have other events and things you can participate in. So go and check
We
it
have
out.
the Bliss program too, that's just starting a new year in January.
Right.
And that's
called
like
Bliss
a daily
program.
discipline.
Yep. It's just a daily practice with calls. I think they're weekly or every other week calls that go with that. So check this out. Support us. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to the science and the dissemination of it and the living of it and supporting people and living their science fully, being who they are. So at any rate, thank you so much. We will see you next week. Or are we taking a week off? Well, we'll determine.
We have to, because I'm not going to be available.
All right. So stay tuned. We're going to take a week off between Christmas and New Year's. We shall see you in the new year. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and happy, happy, happy New Year. Thank you so much.